Well, the chaos in Egypt is creating a diplomatic dilemma for the United States. There is concern today that Mr. Obama could go down in history as the president who lost Egypt, a critical ally of ours in the Middle East. Some comparing him to President Jimmy Carter, who saw a pro-Western government in Iran fall to radical Islamists on his watch. Joining me now, KT McFarland, a Fox News national security analyst, Waleed Phares, Middle East expert and author of The Coming Revolution, The Struggle for Freedom in the Middle East, and Bernard Whitman, former Bill Clinton pollster and a Democratic strategist. Panel, thank you so much for being here with me.
Thank you.
I want to start with that, Waleed, the question of, could President Obama go down in history as the president who lost Egypt, and what does that mean?
Well, first of all, the events in Egypt did not start in 2008. They started years ago. But of course, the messaging coming from the United States administration are extremely important to three players in Egypt. One is the president. President of Egypt, that is, he should listen to a word that would encourage him for an exit strategy. Two, the armed forces in Egypt, who should basically be told by the international community that they are in charge to protect the society and protect the country. And three, probably most importantly, is to address the demonstrators, their leaders. We need to identify them and then partner with them. I don't think at this point in time the three actors have heard enough so far.
KT, how is President Obama supposed to save Egypt? How was he supposed to do it in his first 2 years of office? How could he possibly do it now? They're not listening to the United States right now, are they?
Well, wait a minute. You know, we give them $1.5 billion of aid, and that certainly gets us a seat at the table. And secondly, we have very strong military-to-military ties. So I do think we have a lot of ability to influence events. But the problem that the president is going to have is he's really got to have two dialogues going. One, whatever he says publicly, and then privately, as Waleed has just said, he's got to speak to and address all of the different players. I think that revolutions are like three-act plays. Now, the first act, topple the autocrat, the dictator. Second act, reformers come in, but they tend to not be terribly effective. And then third act, which is what happened in Iran, is that they get brushed aside by the radical extremists. And that's the danger in Egypt, that we have to make sure when one act is finished, we go to the second act, and that's where we stay, and we never get to the third act.
How are we supposed to do that? That sounds all well and good. I think, you know, that's a very understandable analogy. Act one, we're in now. Act two, in come the Democratic opposition folks. And then Act three is the one we're looking to prevent, which is the Muslim Brotherhood somehow gets in control. They hate Israel, they hate us, they love Iran, and we're looking at an Egypt that was once an ally that looks more like Iran, KT.
Well, but here's the thing. Jimmy Carter flubbed it because there was Act one, where he helped pull the rug out from under the Shah, but then when the Democratic reformers came into government, Jimmy Carter didn't support them. He didn't endorse them. He sat on his hands. So by the time anybody was ready for the next act, we were out of the game. And the next act was the Ayatollah, which at the time, even the Carter administration didn't think was going to be such a problem. I think what Obama has to recognize is Act 3 is a problem. The Muslim Brotherhood is Act 3. They will be a problem. So when we get to Act 2, embrace them, give them aid, give them assistance, help them every way we can, because you don't want that second step to fall.
Bernard, is this a potential political problem for President Obama, or are people looking to inject politics in this by comparing him to President Carter when they shouldn't yet?
Well, Megan, I think that's exactly right, and I think it would be a real shame to trivialize the events of what's going on in Egypt to try to score short-term political points. I think in order to move smoothly along KT's Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, we need to agree on the following four elements. And I think it's something that Republicans and Democrats can both agree on. Number one, we've got to stand with the Egyptian people. Number two, we have to stand for nonviolence. Three, the politics have got to be consensual politics. And number four, whatever government comes into being post-elections in the fall of this year has to fundamentally agree to abide by the terms of the 1979 peace accords and stand by Israel's security and right to exist. And I think, in fact, we have great sway with the Egyptian people. In fact, for the first time, the BBC poll last year that polls dozens of countries' attitudes towards the U.S. showed for the first time 45% view the United States favorably, 29% view the United States unfavorably. That is a dramatic shift in just 2 years. 2 years ago, 73% of the Egyptian people saw us unfavorably. So I think that, combined with our strong ties, military and diplomatically suggests that we have a number of cards to play in the unfolding situation there.
Well, so it's interesting after President Obama went to Cairo early on in his term. Waleed, let me ask you this. You know, Bernard says we need to make clear that we stand with the Democratic opposition, but the White House is very reluctant to take sides. They're not calling for Hosni Mubarak to step down. And indeed, today we heard reaction out of Israel, where the pundits there are saying that they can't believe that we, the United States, appear ready to dump a staunch strategic ally of 3 decades, meaning Mubarak, saying, even Shimon Peres saying, look, he didn't do everything right, but he kept peace in the Middle East. Israel seems to be pressing us to side more with Mubarak.
The problem has been that President Mubarak did the right thing in terms of protecting peace with Israel. But in his own country, he did not do the right thing in dumping basically the democratic movement. When the Copts Christians were attacked, he did not take measures. When student union and women and other forces have demanded reform, he should have done what he has done last week, i.e. to appoint a vice president, to appoint a new cabinet, to call for reform last year. So he came a little bit late in the process. My suggestion is that President Obama can do still significant things by convincing President Mubarak to leave, to have an exit strategy, by ensuring that the military are going to be protected and supported. And the most tricky thing is to identify the representatives of the reformers inside Egypt. Because keep in mind, 80% of the marchers are people from middle class, labor, peace lover people, but then you have 20% who are the Muslim Brotherhood and other radicals. We need an architecture in Washington that would separate Mubarak from the army and the Muslim Brotherhood from the majority of peace-loving people.
Oh, yeah, and I think one thing to remember, right now, nobody's burning the American flag in these demonstrations. Nobody's burning the Israeli flag. So it's not an anti-American, anti-Israeli movement. It's really a movement of people who want economic freedom and they want economic rights and political reform.
It's ultimately driven by the youth. Ultimately, all these leaders are under 30, and it's not as if the Muslim Brotherhood is directing this. They, in fact, are sort of latecomers to the party. This movement is being driven by young activists in their teens and 20s.
They got in late in the game and just sort of tried to commandeer it. Listen, great panel, everybody. KT, Bernard, Waleed, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.